Hello, I'm Robert Lomas, and this is the 9th of 17 episodes of a work called 10 Nights in the Black Lion, which was written by the novelist Daniel Owen in 1859. It was originally written as a serial in a magazine called Charles Bala, which was produced by his friend Nathaniel Jones. This is the 9th episode, and it was published on July the 14th, 1859. Episode 9. The 5th Evening. Nearly 5 years passed before my business took me back to Cedarville. I knew very little about what had taken place there during my absence. All I knew was that Simon Slade had been charged with manslaughter and causing the death of Joe Morgan's child. However, Judge Lyman had used his influence with an expensive lawyer to have the charge set aside, and so Slade did not stand trial. It was said by some that the lawyer had used every unjust legal device in the book to acquit him. The impression I had formed of Judge Lyman was not favourable. To me he appeared cool, selfish and opinionated. Listening to his conversations with the ordinary people who came into the bar-room made me think that despite the fact he held a seat in the American Congress, he was a poor, superficial and inexperienced politician. As my stagecoach drove into Cedarville, I noticed many changes in places that were familiar to me. We went past Judge Hammond's residence. That I remembered as the nicest and most cultured in Cedarville, but now I saw a very different scene. Was this just the passage of time? Had my impression of this impressive house been enhanced by not seeing it for a while, or had the hand of tide really corroded it? As these thoughts were going through my head, I saw an old man in the spacious forecourt in front of the building. He was standing with his back against one of the pillars. He was holding his hat, and his long hair was strewn over his neck and shoulders. His head was down, staring at his bosom, and he appeared to be deep in thought. As the coach passed, he looked up. I was surprised to recognise Judge Hammond. He was so greatly changed. He still looked prosperous, but his eyes had sunk deep into his shrivelled face. It was a face filled with troubles. Troubles, I say, but how inadequate that word is to convey what I saw in his countenance. As I looked into his face, I saw a tiredness for the world in his eyes. Time had not treated him well while I had been away, and he reminded me of a once magnificent bed of flowers that was now well past its best. However, the coach was moving fast, and the richest man in Cedarville was soon lost to my sight. Within a few minutes the coach arrived at the front of the Black Lion. As I descended from the carriage, a scruffy red-haired man came forward and grabbed my hand. At first I didn't recognise him. Then, when he spoke, I saw it was Simon Slade. Seeing his present appearance, I couldn't help contrasting it to when I had first seen him, some 6 years previously. I couldn't help thinking, well, is this what keeping a pub does to a man? The Black Lion had changed both inside and out, and not for the better. Everything looked shoddy. Instead of being clean and beautiful as before, the house was dirty and chaotic. In the bar-room, a young Irish lad passed me the book where travellers write their names. I asked for a coffee. After I had written my name, the lad ordered my coffee to be taken to the room where I was to stay. It was the same room I had occupied during my previous visits. I followed the servant to a dusty, dirty room which smelt disgusting. The accommodation had also undergone considerable change, and not for the better. After I had removed the dust from my clothes and washed, I went downstairs to the lobby and took a chair. There were many healthy and strong, yet idle men loafing about. If they had something to do, they must have preferred laziness to work. One of them rocked back and forth in a chair, chanting "The Old Folks at Home." Another lay on his face, his body and spirit too lethargic to shake or sing. A third had slipped down in his chair. His feet were higher than his head, and supported by a stool, while a fourth was flat asleep on a bench, with his hat over his face, to protect him from insect bites. All but the sleeper watched me as I took my seat in the middle of them. None of them changed their stance in the slightest degree. Perhaps to move their eyes would have felt like a few hours' labour, so they all avoided the effort. A man in a light carriage sped past. One of the idlers suddenly jumped to his feet and shouted out, "Hello, who's that then?" He was trying to peer through the dust cloud that the wheels of the carriage and the hooves of the horse had stirred up. I saw that one, said the loafer, rubbing his eyes to wake himself up. Who was it, Matthew? He asked the Irish barkeeper, who was standing in the doorway. Willie Hammond, said Matthew the barkeep. Really? Is that his new £60 horse? Yes, and it's a right old goat. Isn't it so? But he's got himself a fast un, the young master. I don't know that, said one of the men, laughing. I don't think anything in creation can beat Willie Hammond. He's so quick I didn't even see him. Is that so? But despite all that, he's quite the boy, and generous to a fault. I'm sure his father will agree with you about that, said Matthew. I think so too, because he has to sustain the bills, he replied. I think Willie's got the upper hand with him in the business. Is that Hammond and Son, the mill and distillery? I said. Yes, what about it? Well, the old man made Willie a manager. He thought a watchman's burden would calm him down and make him take responsibility. That's not for Willie. It'll take more than that to tame him. The experience has been applied too late. Yes, the old man realises it now, and I think that's his frustration. He never comes here now, does he, Matthew? Who? Judge Hammond? No, he doesn't. He and Slade quarrelled a year ago. He's never entered the door since. Something about Willie and, The speaker didn't say the name, but winked broadly, and nodded his head, indicating someone from the Slade family. I understand it that way. Do you think Willie likes her? Matthew shrugged his shoulders and didn't answer. She's a beautiful girl, he said in a low tone. She's good enough for Hammond's son any day, although if she were my daughter I'd rather see her in Jericho than in his company. He'll have enough money to keep her, though. She'll live like a queen. For how long? Quiet, said Matthew quickly. That's enough now. I looked up and I saw a young lady approaching the house. I immediately recognised the gracious and humble face of Flora Slade. 5 years had made incredible progress to her youth and promise. As she came through the lobby, I thought that a great deal of thought and affliction had burdened her beautiful face, but I was pleased to see the idle men showed her proper respect as she passed. Actually, she is a pretty girl, said one, after she had gone into the house. She's too good for Willie Hammond, said Matthew, though people say he's generous and clever. That's what I think. She's as good and pure as an angel, but him, he's as bad as a man can be. Slade's appearance ended their conversation. A second look at him didn't impress me any more favourably than the first had. His face was grim, and as he took a chair it was clear he had become a heavy drinker. We spoke for a while, and then Slade turned to the barkeeper. Did you see Frank here this afternoon? Slade asked Matthew. No, was the barkeeper's reply. I saw him with Tom Wilkins a while ago, said one of the men sitting in the porch. What was he doing with Tom Wilkins? Slade muttered in an upset tone. He doesn't mind much the company he keeps. Shooting. Shooting? Yes, they had bird guns. Wasn't close enough to ask them where they were going. Slade seemed disturbed at the news. Then he muttered something to himself, got up and went into the house. I could tell the old hand a lot more about Frank, the man added, but no matter. Slade doesn't know half his history, observed Matthew. He's the vilest boy I've ever known. Boy? Frank wouldn't like to hear you call him a boy. I'll have time to talk to him about that, replied Matthew, because if there were any manners to a quarrel, that would be a trouble that we wouldn't have in this house. I'm surprised that his father has not put him into business. The lazy life he's leading will destroy him. He's been behind the bar for a couple of years. Yes, and he was all right with a mixing glass, but he was too good a customer himself. True. He regularly got as drunk as a fool before he turned 15. Are you sure? I said. It's true, sir, said the man, turning to me. And that's not all. You know, sir, that barroom dialogues are not always blessed with the best of language. Well, Frank soon learned, and within a short time he was as obnoxious as any one of them. I'm no saint myself, but I've felt my blood run cold many times as I've heard him swear. I'm sorry for his mother, I said, as my mind ran straight to Mrs. Slade. You do right, he replied. I think there's no one with a sadder heart in Cedarville. It was a black day for her when Simon Slade gave up the mill and built a pub. She was against it from the beginning. I guessed that was so. I know it, said the man. My wife has known her for years. I remember well, when the mill was sold, She came to our house and wept like a child. But Slade wanted to be a publican, and I don't think I've ever seen a genuine smile on Mrs. Slade's face since, sir. It's a lot for a man to lose, I said. What? He asked, clearly not quite understanding me. His wife's cheerful face, I replied. Her face shows nothing but heartache, he said. That's the worst of all. Quite true. It was a lot to lose. But what has he gained to make up for that? The man shook his shoulders. Yes, what has he gained? I asked again. Can you tell me? Well, one thing, he's richer. And happier? The man shook his shoulders again. I didn't say that. Well, how much richer? I asked. A lot. Somebody said yesterday that he was worth £5,000. Really? As much as that? Yes. How did he accumulate such wealth so quickly? Business is good at the bar, he replied, and that pays well. He must have sold a lot of liquor in 6 years. That's so. I don't think I would be far wrong if I said that as much liquor has been consumed in the town in the last 6 years as was in the previous 20 years, before the opening of the Black Lion. I'd say 40, said another man who was listening to the speech. Well, let's say 40 then, replied the other. How's this? I replied. You had a pub here before the Black Lion opened? We did, and many other places where liquor was sold. But everyone far and wide knew Simon Slade the miller, and everyone liked him. He was a good miller, and a joyful and humorous man. Slade built the inn and laid it out beautifully. His establishment was immediately supported by Judge Hammond, Judge Lyman, and Solicitor Wilson, and all the gentry of the place. So, of course, everyone else did the same, so you can easily account for his wealth. We all thought in the beginning that a new pub was going to change Cedarville. Yes, the man answered with a laugh, and so it has. In what way? Oh, in many ways. It's made some men richer and some poorer. Who has it made poorer? Dozens of people. If you see a well-to-do foreman and a good businessman, then you can assume that many people are poor. How so? I wanted to hear more of how this man, who it was easy to see was a good customer, reasoned about the subject. A publican doesn't add to anyone's wealth. He takes his customers' money but gives nothing of value in return, nothing that can be counted as personal profit. Is that not so? It was obvious that he fully believed in what he said. Who in particular is poorer? Judge Hammond, for one. Yes, he's much poorer. What caused the judge to get poorer? The opening of the Black Lion, as I said. How did it affect him? He was one of Slade's most ardent henchmen. To show his support he came here every day, and he took a glass of brandy, and urged everyone else to do the same. Among those who followed his example was his son Willie. He shouldn't have brought a hopeful young man like Willie within 20 miles of this human trap. The man lowered his voice before giving that name to the Slade pub. But now, he added, no one is rushing to destruction faster than Willie is. When his father discovered that his son had been corrupted and that the company he kept was a dangerous character, it was too late. He bought Slade's mill for 2 reasons. First, to earn a large sum for himself, or so he thought, and secondly, to set Willie up in business and keep him from bad company. To make Willie more responsible, he unwisely trusted him to become the chief manager of the works, for that enterprise has turned into a slump. I heard yesterday that the mill is to be closed and put up for sale. Isn't the task of keeping the mill as rewarding as he thought it would be? No, not while it's under the control of Willie Hammond. He has too many bad friends, men who cling to him because he has money and spends it like water. Half the time he isn't at the mill, and he neglects the business. I've heard it said that he's wasted £3,000 and more. How is that possible? Well, people talk, and it's not always to his advantage. There's a man called Green who's been staying here most of the time for the last 5 years. Nobody knows where he came from, and he has no friends in the neighbourhood. Well, this man became acquainted with Willie, as they both used to go to the bar, and they've been friends ever since. It should be said, sir, that this Green is a gambler. I believe it myself. If so, it's easy to see where Willie's money has gone. I agreed with what he has said. Well, if Green is a gambler, I said, he's richer for the opening of a new pub in Cedarville. Yes, he is, and Cedarville is a poorer prospect for it. He's a bloodsucker. I've heard it said that he never bought an inch of land, nor gave 1 penny to any good fellow. Not only is he robbing them of their money, I observed, but he's corrupting those with whom he engages. True. Perhaps it's not just Willie Hammond who he's corrupted, I said. Oh, yes, sir. I've come here every night for many years, as most have, he added, and I've noticed who else does. There are at least 6 young men from the best families in the area among the regular visitors, all unknowing to their friends and relatives. About 9 o'clock, you see them sliding silently from the bar, followed by Green and Slade, and you'll always see a light radiating from a special room, which I know to be Green's room. These are the facts, sir, and you can draw your own conclusion. What? Is Slade corrupted along with these young men? I asked. Do you think he's gambling too? If Slade hasn't been taken in by Harvey Green, then I am very much mistaken. Impossible. It's bad to use a card school to keep a pub, sir, said the man. I agree completely with that. He's been running his school for 7 years, and it's done well, sir. Too true. Simon Slade, since he became a publican, is not the man he was as a miller. Anyone with half an eye can see that. Is Slade a drunk? He's certainly taking a bit too much. That's a bad sign. Yes, and if Simon Slade is not much poorer a year today than he is now, I'm no prophet. That professional gambler is too much for any man. Our discourse ended here as one of the company pointed his finger at my talkative friend and then drew it across his throat. I was left in dismay and disarray. That's the end of the 9th episode of 10 Nights in the Black Lion, written by Daniel Owen. It was first published in the magazine Charles Bala on July the 14th, 1859. I'm Robert Lomas, and I've spent the last year translating this. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please click the subscribe box in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen.